Hello history buffs, time travelers, and scholars. Imagine standing in a crowded square, the air heavy with tension and curiosity. All eyes are fixed on a tall wooden structure, the guillotine. For centuries, this machine delivered swift and public justice, but the experience of witnessing an execution was anything but ordinary. It was a mix of fear, fascination, and grim reality. Public executions, a grim spectacle. In France, the guillotine remained in use until the late 1970s, its final act taking place on September 10, 1977. However, public executions ended much earlier, on June 17, 1939, with the beheading of Eugen Weidmann, convicted of 6 murders. That day, the streets of Paris were packed with rowdy spectators who turned the grim occasion into a chaotic spectacle. People cheered, booed, and even filmed the execution in secret. The unruly behavior of the crowd marked the end of public executions. From then on, executions were held privately in prison courtyards. This decision addressed 2 key issues. First, it ensured the guillotine could be permanently set up and properly maintained, avoiding embarrassing malfunctions like misaligned blades or broken triggers. Second, it stopped the carnival-like atmosphere surrounding executions, where bars filled with excited spectators, building owners sold prime window views, and children climbed trees to catch a glimpse. Even when officials tried to perform executions in secret, assembling guillotines at night and scheduling early morning events, word always got out. Notices were posted around town, or newspapers announced the time and place, drawing crowds eager to witness the grim event. By the late 1930s, the guillotine had become both a morbid fascination and a public nuisance, forcing the government to take executions out of the public eye for good. The guillotine, a simple yet terrifying machine. The guillotine was created with a purpose: to deliver swift, efficient, and, in theory, humane executions. Its design was both simple and chilling. Standing tall and narrow, the guillotine's wooden frame looked like a giant window frame, except instead of a sliding pane of glass, it held a sharp, weighted steel blade. This blade, angled for precision, hung high above, looming over the condemned and the crowd below. Its height wasn't just functional, it was theatrical, ensuring maximum visibility for the public to witness the grim spectacle. When the blade was released, it would drop with terrifying speed and force, intended to sever the head cleanly in one swift motion. The head would fall neatly into a woven basket filled with sawdust, which absorbed the blood and minimized the mess. This wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about efficiency. The body was then quickly placed into a cheap wooden coffin, making the entire process disturbingly methodical. The guillotine's efficiency was part of what made it so terrifying. There were no unnecessary frills, no room for hesitation. Everything about the machine was calculated to ensure a fast and predictable outcome. The simplicity of its design, a few wooden beams, a blade, and some rope, hid the sheer power of the device. It wasn't just a tool for execution, it was a symbol of cold, mechanical justice, devoid of any emotion. For the crowds who gathered to watch, the guillotine was both mesmerizing and horrifying. The sight of the towering machine, the sound of the blade's release, and the grim finality of its act left an unforgettable impression. Yet, for the condemned, it was the ultimate instrument of fear, a machine that promised no second chances. Despite its efficiency, the guillotine was not perfect. Misaligned blades and mechanical failures occasionally led to gruesome outcomes, adding another layer of dread to its already fearsome reputation. In the end, the guillotine was more than just a tool for executions. It was a symbol of an era. Its stark design reflected the harsh realities of justice at the time, making it both an efficient mechanism and a chilling reminder of mortality. And hey, if you're enjoying the ride down this spooky history lane, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, or else you might get chopped from the next video. The Grim Procession, Carts of the Condemned. One of the first signs that an execution was about to take place was the sight of rickety wooden carts rolling through the streets, carrying the condemned to their grim fate. These carts were simple and utilitarian, resembling those used for hauling firewood. But instead of logs, they transported people bound for the guillotine. During the height of the French Revolution, The guillotine's design became so refined that it could execute 12 people in just 13 minutes. This grim efficiency kept those carts constantly busy, ferrying victims from prisons to public squares. The ominous procession, led by French soldiers known as gendarmes, signaled the inevitable arrival of the guillotine itself, a sight that both horrified and thrilled onlookers. The guillotine's early efficiency was largely thanks to Charles-Henri Sanson, the royal executioner of France during the reign of King Louis XVI. Sanson meticulously tested the machine on animals and cadavers to perfect its design. Its public debut was with Nicolas-Jacques Pelletier, whose execution marked the first time the guillotine was used in front of a crowd. The blade's clean, precise cut impressed Sanson, and the guillotine's use quickly spread across France, cementing its reputation as a tool of revolutionary
there
justice.
There were counts of blinkings of the eyes.
Eyewitnesses described the scene with grim fascination. The carts, modified with wooden planks for seating, carried 2 or 3 victims at a time, their hands tied behind their backs. The uneven streets caused the carts to jolt and sway, making the prisoners' heads bob up and down, much to the amusement of the gathered crowds. One witness recounted, "The same carts as those used for carrying wood were fitted with floorboards for seats. On each board sat 2 or 3 victims. Their hands were tied, and the constant jolting made their heads nod, drawing laughter from the spectators." These carts became a symbol of the guillotine's relentless efficiency, a chilling reminder of how commonplace and systematic public executions had become during that turbulent era. For the condemned, the journey was their final parade through the city, a moment of public spectacle that reinforced both the terror and fascination surrounding the guillotine. The Tricases, knitting at the edge of chaos. Not all crowds at the guillotine were rowdy or chaotic. Some had an almost eerie calmness to them. Among the spectators, groups of women, known as Tricases, stood out. These women, often seen knitting while conversing, became a peculiar fixture at executions during the French Revolution. Originally, the Tricases were regular attendees of local government debates, keen to participate in public discourse. However, when officials banned women from public assemblies, these resourceful individuals turned to the next major public event for engagement: guillotine executions. What began as a form of social gathering soon evolved into a strange and macabre tradition. These women would bring their knitting to the guillotine square, crafting items like scarves, mittens, and even Phrygian caps, a revolutionary symbol, while casually watching the executions. For them, it was a peculiar blend of domesticity and civic involvement. Over time, they became emblematic of a darker side of public participation, as their presence at executions became associated with bloodlust and vengeance. As the French Revolution grew more violent, so too did the reputation of the Tricases. Witnesses began to describe them not as passive onlookers, but as fierce and vocal participants in the spectacle. Their calm demeanor while witnessing such brutality unnerved many, and painted them as symbols of the growing anger and bitterness that gripped revolutionary France. These knitting women became part of the grim theater of the guillotine, their needles clicking rhythmically as heads rolled. They were a reminder that the revolution had blurred the lines between ordinary life and extraordinary violence, turning even a simple craft into an unsettling symbol of the era's complexities. The executioner, the star of the guillotine show. The executioner was the undeniable centerpiece of the grim spectacle surrounding the guillotine. All eyes were on him as he carried out his chilling duty, whether the crowd viewed him as a necessary hero or a cold-hearted villain. To the gathered masses, he was the star player in a grim performance, commanding both fear and fascination. The guillotine's hands-off design offered executioners a peculiar detachment from the act of killing. Unlike the brutal physicality required for older methods of execution, such as hanging or beheading with a sword, the guillotine's simplicity shifted the focus to the machine itself. This mechanical efficiency allowed executioners to emotionally distance themselves from the act, seeing their role as more of a technical operator than an arbiter of life and death. But the executioner's job wasn't just about pulling the lever. He was responsible for prepping the guillotine, ensuring its blade was sharp and its mechanism flawless. After the act, the cleanup fell to him, including removing bodies and washing away the evidence of the day's work. It was a role that demanded precision, attention to detail, and a steady disposition, hardly a glamorous task, despite the grim spotlight. Interestingly, Parisians had mixed feelings about the guillotine's efficiency. Many thought the swift and clean nature of the execution stripped death of its ritualistic and emotional weight. Without the drawn-out drama of older methods, the guillotine seemed almost clinical. Some members of the crowd felt cheated by this mechanical detachment, longing for the theatrics of traditional gallows. It wasn't uncommon to hear disgruntled spectators shouting, "Give me back my wooden gallows." Last words, final testimonies. Before the blade, the guillotine, for all its cold efficiency, occasionally allowed a poignant moment of humanity before the act. The condemned were sometimes given the opportunity to utter their last words. The allowance for a final statement added a somber gravity to an otherwise clinical process, giving the audience a glimpse of the person behind the crime or fate. Not every victim's final words were recorded, but those that were have endured as windows into the minds of individuals facing their ultimate moment. One of the most famous examples comes from King Louis XVI, who stood before the crowd on January 21, 1793, moments before the blade fell. The deposed monarch proclaimed, "I die innocent of all the crimes laid to my charge. I pardon those who have occasioned my death, and I pray to God that the blood you are going to shed may never be visited on France." His words reflected a mix of defiance and forgiveness, and though many jeered at him, some in the crowd felt a pang of sympathy for their former king. Not all faced the guillotine with such poise. Louis XV's infamous mistress, Madame du Barry, succumbed to fear. Pleading desperately for more time, she cried out, "One more moment, monsieur, just one more moment." Her terror-filled last words contrasted sharply with the stoic demeanor officials expected of the condemned, highlighting the deeply human reaction to an unavoidable fate. Marie Antoinette, Louis XV's queen, reportedly had a more personal and almost mundane moment. Accounts suggest that, as she made her way to the scaffold, she accidentally stepped on the foot of her executioner. Her final words were an apology. "Pardon me, monsieur. I did not mean to do it." The simple humanity of this remark, apologizing for a misstep while walking to her death, has become one of the most enduring stories about her execution, encapsulating the blend of tragedy and absurdity that often surrounded the guillotine. Executioners, the grim stars of the guillotine show. While the guillotine was created as a more humane method of execution, it didn't entirely remove the gory spectacle that fascinated crowds. Executioners played a central role in this morbid theater, often becoming infamous figures themselves. Some executioners, eager to feed the public's appetite for drama, would theatrically raise the freshly severed head for the audience to see. This act wasn't just for show, it symbolized finality and allowed the crowd to engage in the grim ritual of witnessing justice. One of the most chilling stories comes from the execution of Charlotte Corday in 1793. After her beheading, the executioner held up her head and allegedly slapped her cheeks, causing her face to blush. A spectator who witnessed this event claimed that her eyes seemed to retain awareness for a fleeting moment, staring back at the crowd as if acknowledging the indignity of the situation. Whether this account was exaggerated or real, it added to the macabre lore surrounding the guillotine. The aftermath of executions wasn't just about the drama. It left behind a gruesome reality. The sheer volume of blood created a stench so unbearable that residents near guillotine sites frequently complained. Yet, in some cases, the blood was seen as a sacred relic. For instance, after King Louis XV's execution, many in the crowd rushed forward to dip their handkerchiefs in his spilled blood, treating it as a memento of the historic moment. Not everyone could stomach the grim proceedings. Albert Camus, the renowned French philosopher, wrote about how his father's experience witnessing a guillotine execution left him deeply traumatized. During World War I, Camus's father attended the execution of a convicted murderer in Algiers. What began as morbid curiosity ended in revulsion. Camus recounted that his father returned home in a state of shock, threw himself onto his bed, and vomited uncontrollably. He never spoke of what he had witnessed. Camus later reflected on this incident in his 1957 essay on the guillotine, highlighting how the supposed humane execution method still carried a visceral horror that scarred even hardened spectators. What do you think? Did the guillotine live up to its reputation as a humane method of execution? Or was it just another instrument of terror? Let us know your thoughts. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed diving into this chilling piece of history, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more fascinating stories like this. See you in the next video.